and I were in that hotel room together.
What in the world have we done?
Basta!
In the 80s, televangelists like Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker were making hundreds of millions.
The TV ministers insist they're just doing God's will.
And I just believe that anybody can make it.
When I was still a virgin, I met the head of the PTO, Evangelist Jim Bakker.
Going through what must have been the most public hell a person can go through.
I mean, the man standing there with absolutely nothing on. It certainly was not an affair.
If we could put our marriage back together, then anybody could put their marriage back together.
Homosexual incidents dating back from 1956 to the present.
What do you think they're gonna say? You got all these men up there against me.
Remember, when you help the shepherd, you're helping the sheep.
Jim Bakker, are we gonna do it tonight? I wish you dead.
The maximum sentence of 120 years in prison.
Devil wants to paralyze.
Abuse in the name of religion is still abuse.
He raped me.
We begin tonight with one of 1987's most widely covered news stories, the sex and financial scandal that destroyed Jim and Tammy Bakker's television ministry called PTL.
Would you like to hear women confessing their deepest, darkest secrets?
Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker's rise to fame was something America had never seen. Faith, fortune, and television spectacle fused into one.
Slow push 5. Push 5 is all.
When I joined the staff at CBN with Pat Robertson in September of 1967, Jim and Tammy Bakker were doing a live 1-hour daily children's show using puppets.
The Jim and Tammy Show.
Jim and Tammy were two of the most open, congenial kids I ever saw.
They were young and ambitious when they met at Bible college and married in 1961. Jim was 21, and Tammy was just 19, leaving everything behind to hit the road and preach.
Tammy was the shortest little person I ever saw, but she was so cute that just took over, and she wasn't wearing those high heels, so that made her really look short.
It all really took off in 1978 before I was born. Kind of like today's YouTubers.
You know, I said I couldn't figure out if I wanted a swimming pool or a lake.
It's like I worried about you marrying me for my money. Which I didn't have.
I met you 10 minutes ago, and I feel, as I guess most Americans and probably most people in the world, they feel they already know you.
About 20 million viewers a night worth of Flock. I mean, they talked about goodness, and they talked about heaven, and they talked about the family, and how important the family was, and how important it is to keep together.
Hey, just because you put your makeup on with a butter knife doesn't make you Tammy Bakker.
The Golden Girls. Yes. I just laugh with it. I think it's fun. It's fun. Everybody else laughs, and I laugh too. It's okay.
Mr. Chief, thank you for allowing us to come into on location with you.
Thank you. I'm glad you decided to pick me.
We're going to unveil behind this drape in just a few minutes the most exciting project probably ever undertaken in the history, I think, of Christianity. It's a 504-room hotel, the Heritage Grand Hotel. When you give your $1,000 gift, you'll receive a special membership card.
I'll take that. I received that. That's exactly how we receive from the Lord. We just open up our hearts and say, Lord, I receive.
But I really sincerely believed in what I was teaching. Our ministry just kept getting bigger, bigger, and bigger.
Before the 60s, airtime for religious shows was donated, so you couldn't just buy up all the slots. Well, that changed, and guess what? Televangelists turned it into a business.
He's been jailed, they're divorced, there was sex, violence, drug embezzlement, blackmail, it's a mess. Now we're gonna show you a little foreplay of what their life was all about. Roll the film.
Come out, but I didn't think Brother Durstein would want that. The sun's coming out soon. He keeps saying that. He's got to be right one of these days.
I think Jim was a little mentally keyed up. I think he didn't have it all together in those days. He was extremely persuasive.
Make decisions! Make decisions! Make them even if they're wrong!
And, you know, all that crying and all that stuff. But he was highly emotional. His wife had come from, her name was Tammy LaValle, and she'd come from a little town up in Minnesota where they didn't have indoor plumbing, you know, an outhouse and that kind of thing. And it was, all this stuff was a little bit beyond them. And But they were so ego-driven that when they were here with us, there was nothing but problem. It was confusion all the time, just all the time. The staff just couldn't stand it.
Tammy was working alongside Jim at CBN, but after some creative differences, mainly over how Christian TV should be done, they left 2 years later to start PTL. Jim wanted a more fun, entertainment-style show, while Pat Robertson wanted to keep it more serious and traditional. So they left and built PTL their way.
One time the telethon wasn't doing terribly well, and so Jim started crying and started saying that if people didn't send in $10 or something like that, that they wouldn't be able to survive. And the phone started ringing, people started sending money.
Praise God, $1,000.
Here's another one, first time, $5 a month. Here's another one for $15 a month, and another one here for $10 a month.
We praise God. I can hear phones ringing. We have almost 100 phones busy. Come on.
I saw, and a group of young people happened to see me, and hi Tammy, started screaming. And I imagine before that little session was over, I had probably signed 50, 60 autographs. I mean, I signed hands, I signed.
Preachers who were bilking and the poor and the innocent people of our culture. And that image has never escaped. With the television evangelist is merely an extension of that image, except he's gone from the tent and the sawdust trail into a television studio.
They found and heard about these special nutrition treatments and all in Spain, I believe it was, and you partners paid the bill.
That's right.
For Brian to go, and we're going to build actually a mobile unit that can go to Japan and Korea as well. But our studios, the production for the Asia countries will be in Korea because the studio has been given to us. A studio as big as this building right here.
Eventually it became embarrassing because people, Americans in particular, started going to Korea looking for the PTL studios, and of course they weren't there because we never gave them any equipment or gave them a nickel to buy equipment.
We found that he had said that $350,000 was sent overseas, when in fact we could find no trace that any of that had been sent overseas.
Now if you are facing a mountain so high that just won't move away.
Jim and Tammy Faye's big break came in 1977 when the PTL Club got national syndication. Before that, it was a small operation airing on a few local stations, but once they went nationwide, their audience and donations exploded. With all that new money coming in, PTL grew fast, and Jim wasted no time scaling it up.
If they're gonna kill our kids, we gotta stop it! We've gotta make a decision first that we're going to stop it. We made a decision we were going to the moon, and we went there. Let's make a decision with our president. I'm going to start having a rap session for neighborhood kids at my house. I'm going to start having kids over, the friends and the kids. I'm going to invite by and some of the security people, some of the people that know about drugs, and we're just going to talk. We're going to let the kids talk. I'm going to do what I can for my neighborhood. Why don't you start doing something in your neighborhood?
They hustled hard, scraping by with dollars that couldn't even cover a meal, let alone a motel.
And I put my first mascara on in my whole life at Ada's house. And
she's the reason!
She is!
In just 30 days, Tammy and I will celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary. Tammy, it doesn't seem like 25 years. That seems like a long time.
That's when
a big
you
number.
say it, it sounds like a long time. It doesn't feel like that long.
But now, everything was changing. For Patty, it felt right. Proof that if you commit to something and refuse to quit, eventually it pays off.
So I said, whoa, okay, God, I can't stand her. I wish you'd do something awful to her. She's mean, God. When I told God how I really felt, He knows how you feel anyway, ladies. He knows what's in your heart anyway. You can't hide anything from the Lord.
Still, the Bakkers have been criticized for their own lavish lifestyle.
Well, just because I'm a Christian doesn't mean I don't like nice things either. I love nice things, and Jim and I work very, very hard for nice things.
You know, if everybody was like me, would it be a good world?
Be handsome if they were all like you, honey.
Oh, whoa!
Thank you.
Of course, you always look good.
Hello, this is Tammy Faye.
And this is Jim.
And we're so glad you called today.
It's a beautiful day here where we are. I hope it's nice at your house.
You know, Jim, we just read a funny article in one of the, what I call the rag magazines. And I think I'm supposed to have raised a chicken from the dead, and I've never even been near a chicken.
we celebrated Tammy Sue's birthday. And believe it or not, this little girl who was almost born on television is sweet 16.
The excess of the 80s had the Bakker stamp all over it, for better or worse.
Tammy, do you remember a trip to Chattanooga when Jim was driving and got us lost on these winding mountain dirt roads?
Money started coming in fast, really fast. The Bakkers were pulling in millions in donations, and Patty was fully embracing the luxury life.
The shelves in the video library were filling up with 16 hours of new television every week. PTL had over 1 million daily viewers, generated an income of $120 million a year, and with a staff of over 2,000 had become the second biggest employer in Charlotte.
They moved into a sprawling estate, bought new cars, designer clothes, and flashy jewelry. Patty and Jim had gone from sleeping in their car to living in a mansion. But as the money flowed in, it started driving a wedge between them. Patty focused on her singing, while Jim controlled all the finances. And that's when things started to feel off.
Tammy, that is really scary.
I tried to dry my husband's underwear in the microwave oven. It doesn't work. No.
You like Diet Coke. You just drink it all the time.
I like to drink it like this, you know. I like to drink it like this, like Kathy Lee drinks.
She was busy buying fur coats and flashy sports cars. She flew first class to New York for business, aka partying with rock stars. She was everywhere in the 80s.
Tammy, adored for her honesty.
And then I look in here and do this and fix all up again so I don't shine on the camera.
TV, fame, fortune, that's all Patty Bakker ever wanted. She wanted to sing, and if this was the way to do it while being loved and recognized, she was all in.
And I went to live in California, and my husband went back to Charlotte, North Carolina. And I had a big choice to make. I had been there for about 3 months in California. And I had been reading my Bible and praying.
I think the most exciting thing in all the world is our lifetime partnership.
Oh, Jim, I do.
Those partnerships are at the center of Bakker's indictment. More than $158 million were raised through the partnerships for construction projects that the grand jury concluded were never built.
I got on a little pill called Ativan, and I initially used the little pill to fly with. And to fly with, I mean, on airplanes.
Total 80s meltdown mode. It drove a huge wedge between her and Jim. She was checked out, fully chasing this dream of being a singer and the pills.
Tammy and I are so very glad that we've been granted this opportunity. My sins are under the blood of Jesus Christ. It was 7 years ago that a situation happened when Tammy and I were having a marriage problem. I did not have an affair, a love affair. Tammy and I were having difficulty in our marriage.
According to Jim, his friend, Reverend John Wesley Fletcher, offered to help. They could take a trip to Florida, and there Fletcher would introduce Jim to a pretty young woman, a 20-year-old secretary who worked in a Long Island church. Her name was Jessica Hahn.
Tammy Faye had no clue. For 2 decades, she stood by Jim, defended him, played the role of the devoted wife, all while being the punchline of industry gossip. She found out like the rest of America did, headlines screaming about Jim's indiscretions with Jessica Hahn.
She told all to Playboy, claiming she had been deceived and deflowered by Bakker.
He picked me up by my waist, lifted me out of my chair, and I had this wraparound dress, and he untied it. I'm pushing away. I'm trying to hold on to my dress. I'm pushing away. He takes me by my waist and just, puts me on this bed. The man standing there with absolutely nothing on, staring down at me. He takes off my bra, and he just puts himself on top of me. At this point, I began to cry. And I said, I don't understand what you're doing. And he said, Jessica, remember, when you help the shepherd, you're helping the sheep.
I don't know what to call 15, 20 minutes. It wasn't an affair. It wasn't love. It was sex.
Can you really even remember it?
Not too much.
There are many different accounts of what happened in that Florida hotel room, but this much everyone agrees on. Jessica Hahn was introduced to Jim Bakker. He said he was lonely, and they had a sexual encounter that lasted 15 to 20 minutes, and Jim Bakker said he'd cried afterwards.
Jim paid Jessica Hahn $250,000 in hush money using donations from his own followers to cover it up. But once that secret got out, it blew the lid off everything, and suddenly the world started digging into just how deep Jim's fraud really went.
Former PTL Secretary Jessica Hahn is glad the ordeal is over. Her affair with Jim Bakker initiated the series of events that led to his demise.
I did not have an affair, a love affair. Tammy and I were having difficulty in our marriage, and I got some idea in my hurt that I could make Tammy jealous and somehow win her back to my love.
I can tell you one thing, he's not homosexual, or is he bisexual?
3 men involved with a prostrate Jessica Hahn, who is not even able, apparently, to defend herself against the advances of the third man, who is anonymous.
Probably could have resulted in criminal charges. Now, if you believe Jim Bakker's version of it, it was a consensual liaison.
And this is a direct quote. I was approached by him, this is a former PTL vice president. I was approached by him, that's you, asked to go to his bedroom for a meeting about hotels. After we discussed business, he asked me for a back rub, grabbed my hand, put it where it wasn't supposed to go, and reached for my zipper. I took over fast. It's fascinating and as impossible to ignore as a gigantic traffic accident. It has revealed the hypocrisy that is buried just beneath the surface in most of us, claiming to be incensed, even outraged by what we hear, all the while clamoring for more.
Pay for our airtime and the light bill.
And your bonuses, and your salaries, and the bonuses of, I mean, for example.
Well, we felt he was a fair man. I think it was the saddest moment of my life and probably always will be.
The audience, the hosts, everyone just stared. And that was only the surface. The real story, way darker.
I was sad for the partners. I was sad for everybody concerned. I was sad for my children. The saddest moment of my life because I felt like so many people were disappointed, and I don't like to disappoint anyone.
And if the crumbling of PTL sparked controversy, the breakup of her marriage fueled the critics' fires even more.
I think Jim had too much power. The last year we were at Heritage USA, 6 million people came through the gates.
We began to find that financially, what the world now knows had happened, that Reverend Bakker had used the ministry for personal profiting.
Most of that money was in bonuses. If he had done that in a profit entity, he would have hung him by his heels.
I heard Jim himself say, I hope I hadn't created a monster.
The $9 million we need, let's just round it out because my math is not real good. We'll just round it, $10 million to finish the grand. We've come this far by faith. Why can't we finish it and see a miracle?
Do you have any other suggestions of how I could clear my name?
Well, I mean, one way to clear your name would be to take these things head on. You always strike these glancing blows at it. You seem to be saying that, yes, you'd be prepared to meet your accusers and in front of the governing body of the Assemblies of God.
The empire they built, the PTL Club, Heritage USA, was gone, swallowed by lawsuits, scandal, and disgrace.
The Bakkers and other former PTL leaders now await possible indictments on tax evasion and fraud charges from the federal grand jury meeting in North Carolina.
But after 11 hours of deliberation, a 6-man, 6-woman jury concluded that Bakker was guilty of all 24 counts of a fraud and conspiracy indictment against him. Bakker took the stand in his own defense, insisting he was driven by a religious vision, not the intention to defraud. But prosecutor Deborah Smith said the strategy backfired.
He was definitely our strongest witness for the government case, both on videotape and when he took the stand in his own defense.
Jurors believed the government's argument that Bakker defrauded his ministry out of $4 million to support materialistic appetite.
I believe there are places that we could have found where the venue of this trial would have been less tainted than it was in Charlotte.
Tammy Bakker expressed her feelings in a spiritual and a vow.
All other ground is sinking sand. It's not over till it's over.
Yeah, and once it felt like someone shoved a bun cake ring down over my head, and the bun, right, honey? Yes. And the bun and bread
rose up in flames and all the raisins turned into demons, and I put my hands up and I said, demonic raisins, I rebuke you.
She was the punchline of every late-night show, the woman with the melted mascara, the televangelist's wife who cried on cue, and her kids, distant. Jay and Tammy Sue loved her, sure, but they saw it all.
My son Jamie just walked in. How you doing, Jamie Child? Good.
But preaching family values wasn't the same as having a happy family. I recently sat down with Jim Bakker's son, Jay, and asked him what life with his father had been like. So did you feel close to your father?
Yes and no. There were moments at home and we as a family, we would like hang out in their room and watch television together that I felt really close. But, you know, I had bodyguards, and so I was also raised a lot by security guards.
How would you describe your relationship?
I will never publicly betray an enemy, let alone a friend.
The pills, the denial, the way she clung to a reality that wasn't there anymore. She was unraveling, and they knew it. Tammy Faye had no one left. So she did what she always did. She performed. She went back to TV, back to the cameras, back to pretending everything was fine. She went on talk shows, sold makeup, tried to brand herself as the comeback queen. But it was desperate. It was Tammy Faye in survival mode, still chasing relevance, still craving the love she lost.
Now, do you know how many times you'll be back on the Drew Carey show? Second time?
Well, this is the second time. You are getting really skinny.
I know, but I'm still fat, Tammy Faye.
No,
and
you're
you
not.
shouldn't say, I am, I'm still
That's what they used to tell me, that I had a beautiful face, and I'd say, well, what about the rest of my body?
Meanwhile, Jim? He was in prison.
He only served 5, and so he is out, and now he is back in front of the cameras.
Now, Jim Bakker's back on TV.
If the power goes out, we believe in being ready for anything.
But that didn't mean he was out of the game. He found God again, his version of God. When he got out, he built another ministry, found a new wife, and never looked back.
Was he the victims or the villain in that whole scandal?
I could say I don't think he was a villain. I don't think he ever planned to misuse funds.
Tammy Faye's life at PTL was fading, slipping away like an old summer vacation at the beach. One of those memories you try to hold on to, but with each passing year, the details blur, the feeling drifts, and eventually it's just gone.
I think the government got nervous, one person being able to draw that many people, but we are friends and we can talk, and I think that's very nice, and I wish all divorces could be like that. Why not? You know, why fight and be bitter and be cruel to one another? That does nothing for anyone.
Tammy Faye stood by him through everything, through the cheating, the fraud, the public shame, and he moved on like she was nothing. By the time the 2000s rolled around, Tammy Faye was sick, really sick. Cancer was eating her alive, but she still put on the lashes, still did the interviews, still pretended to be okay.
You see the real Tammy Faye. Mm-hmm. She gives, and I know her, honey, I know her. Yeah. She's the most giving human being I believe I've ever met in my whole life.
Right. The thing I found out about beating cancer is don't be afraid of it. It's all attitude. Because, you know, it's not how you face the circumstances in your life.
When you're alone with yourself in the shower with that
that dumb thing on.
Did you think you could beat it?
I knew I could beat it with God. I never was afraid that I was going to die, Charlie. I just didn't like going through the process of, you know, it was very hard going through that process.
She went on Larry King Live weighing just 65 pounds, barely able to sit up but still smiling, still performing. And then she was gone. She died in 2007, broke, forgotten by the church she helped build, remembered more for her makeup than her legacy. Jim kept preaching. The scandal faded. The world moved on.
He may look very familiar.
Welcome to the Jim Bakker Show!
It's Jim Bakker with closely cropped hair and a white beard, looking markedly different than his days as a household name back in the 70s and 80s.
because God gave Jim Bakker a burden to build a home where special children will live and love.
And I looked in that little face and I said, Kevin, I'm gonna build a house for you.
Growing up in a tiny frozen nowhere town, International Falls, Minnesota, Tammy Faye had nothing.
And my daddy, left when we were 3 years, when I was just a little girl. And so the psychiatrists say that I had a fear of abandonment. And I think I probably did have a fear of abandonment.
And when she met Jim, he had the answers. He had the vision. He had the key to everything she ever wanted. So she followed him blindly, believing he was the one who could take her there.
Jessica knows the truth, Geraldo, and I know the truth. I slept with her in 1980 in February in the Hilton Hotel right here in Manhattan.
Do you also allege, sir, that Jessica at that time was a sexually experienced young lady?
At that time, it was my opinion, and still my view today, that she was.
Would you like to hear women confessing their deepest, darkest secrets?
What was it like going through what must have been the most public hell a person can go through?
Well, if God hadn't have been with me, I really feel like I would have committed.
Don't give up because you made a wrong decision!
I don't know about you, but I feel Jesus is in this place today.
It was what America wanted to believe in. Tammy wore her success, furs, lashes, diamonds, and made women believe they could have it too. But Tammy never stopped believing. So, whatever it is, a lost love, a lost time, a lost dream, chase it. Because Tammy didn't have all the time in the world, but she made the most of it.
Did you not spend the money also?
No, I did not spend any. I had my paycheck. I had my paycheck, but that's all I spent was my paycheck.
A lot of us raised children on our own.
I did too.
All the things you've had, and we did it all.
I've experienced.
Listen, it sounds as though you feel you weren't emotionally prepared to do anything other than submit. So why don't you just call it a rape?
I'm not emotionally prepared to call it a rape. It's just way too involved. It would cause a whole nother scandal.
Seems to have been a life, at least over the last 10 years or so, of self-promotion and self-indulgence. And I ask you again, what kind of a role model do you think you've been?
If an announcer got on the air and said, kids go out and commit, do you know what? They'd have his neck. But your artists are singing it into the hearts of your children.
Really scary because the other things was just scandals and messes, and even when Dad was in prison, it was.
Listen, but I want to tell you, there's a lot of Christians here who love you and who wouldn't be afraid to put their arm around you and tell you that we love you and that we care.
You prayed that God would give you a tithing person, but I understand the colonel vowed to God the tithe even before he had accepted Christ as his Savior. When he first started Kentucky Fried Chicken, he said, is that true, Colonel?
That's right. I prayed to God that he'd make this thing a success.